Hello, everyone. Today we would like to introduce a historical tale. When news broke that my father had been demoted and exiled to Shuozhou, Cao Wenhan arrived at our gates, clutching a letter to dissolve our engagement. His knuckles were white from the strain as he pounded incessantly on the door. Drenched from head to toe in the torrential rain, his face was clouded with a bitterness that seemed long held. He claimed his mother had threatened her own life to force his hand. He spoke of the imperial family's watchful eyes, insisting he could not gamble his future and the lives of his entire clan just to marry me. He promised that once the storm passed, he would find a way to bring me back. The next morning, as our family carriage quietly slipped out of the capital, and we happened to cross paths with the grand bridal procession carrying the Duke's daughter into his manor, my father patted my shoulder, his voice calm and steady. Shuozhou may yet hold a true hero. I simply nodded, offering no argument. 5 years later, my father was reinstated and returned to the imperial court. The first person to appear at our doorstep was Cao Wenhan. Overjoyed to the point of not even changing out of his official robes, he rushed over to propose. But when the great gates swung open, he was met not by me, but by a towering man slowly sharpening a blade. The cold silver glint of the steel reflected in his eyes as a mocking smirk played on his lips. "You've lost your wife, but her husband is still very much alive." The story: a sudden southeast wind gusted through, whipping up the carriage curtains before me. If the rain was relentless today, turning the road into a treacherous mire of mud. Fortunately, the guards recognized my father's carriage and immediately cleared the way. My old wet nurse had been waiting outside the city gates for who knows how long. As they helped her into the carriage, tears began to stream down her face the moment she saw me. Speechless, she could only grasp my hands with a trembling touch, pulling me into her lap to rest my head on her knees, just as I had when I was a child. 5 years! How did my young lady survive all those years? A sharp sting hit my nose. I buried my face in her thick robes, struggling to suppress the tears and maintain my composure. My sister-in-law gave a soft laugh. "Nanny, don't cry. Yuner lives a peaceful life now. Besides, she's married a man who stands tall enough to touch the heavens." "Yes, that's right." The wet nurse wiped her eyes and looked up at my hair, now styled in the manner of a married woman. Her eyes brightened. "When I received your letter last year, I was worried that because the young master was a military man, he wouldn't know how to care for a lady. But seeing your rosy complexion, healthier even than when you were home, it's clear he dotes on you." Hearing this, I instinctively lowered my head, my lips curving into a small, silent smile. "Whoever marries Yuner is blessed for 3 lifetimes," my sister-in-law remarked, before her expression soured as if remembering something unpleasant. She huffed coldly. "Only a blind fool would play such a filthy game of social climbing. The thought of facing those people again makes me sick to my stomach." The carriage rattled through the South Gate's main street. The rain continued to pour, the wind howling in a way that took me back to the day our family was exiled. It had been a day just like this, drenched and miserable, driven out of the city like stray dogs. We couldn't even afford to rent a horse, huddling together in a rickety cart, clutching our belongings. No one cried aloud, but on every face, you couldn't tell the difference between the rain and the tears. At that very moment, the Cao family's wedding procession had passed us by, painting the streets in vibrant reds with silk banners fluttering in the wind. Cao Wenhan sat high atop his horse, handsome and arrogant, even more so than on the day he topped the imperial examinations. No one would have guessed that only the day before he had personally delivered the letter breaking our engagement. That letter, written in his own hand, was still tucked in my luggage, Yet he was already rushing to marry a noble lady, severing all ties with my family. In that moment, I wasn't sure if I felt sadness or hatred. It wasn't until I regained my senses that I realized my father, sitting in front, had turned around. His hands, calloused and scarred from his time in prison, gently wiped my cheeks. He said, "Yuner, don't cry. It was your father who misjudged his character. In the future, I will find you someone worthy, someone who will never let you suffer." My throat tightened, and I could only nod in silence. I opened my bundle, took out Cao Wenhan's letter, and tore it into pieces, piece by piece, de-dropping them into the river. The churning waters quickly swept everything away. 5 years had passed. Crossing this street again, my heart was as calm as a still lake. The person from that year no longer stirred even a ripple in my soul. Only my wet nurse and sister-in-law seemed unable to let go of their anger. As my sister-in-law continued her frustrated venting, the wet nurse chimed in, her voice full of indignant satisfaction. The Cao family thought marrying the Duke's daughter would secure their fortune forever. Who knew that lady was as promiscuous as she was jealous? She was involved with another man even before the wedding. Not long after entering the Cao household, she gave birth to a bastard child who died in infancy. The scandal rocked the capital. The two families have cut all ties, even at banquets. They avoid each other like fire and water. My sister-in-law laughed heartily. "Karma!" I didn't respond, merely pulling back the curtain slightly to look outside, my gaze as quiet as the falling rain. Suddenly, a rider drew close to the carriage. Wearing a bamboo hat pulled low, he leaned over to peer inside, revealing a handsome face. He gave a soft smirk and winked at me. "I'm taking my father-in-law to the palace first." His voice was deep, and he lowered it further to add a final instruction. "You've coughed twice today. Remember to drink the ginger soup for me." Though his voice was low, my sister-in-law caught every word and immediately teased, "Don't worry. With the nanny and me watching, she won't be able to pour it out in secret." My face flushed hot instantly. I yanked the curtain shut, wishing he would just leave. But he was thick-skinned and shameless. He merely chuckled, cupping his hands toward the carriage. "My wife is quite stubborn. I must trouble you two to look after her." Laughter erupted both inside and outside the carriage. Fortunately, my elder brother spoke up from the front, his voice trailing. "All right, Jingrang, our father has already gone ahead. Aren't you going to follow?" Only then did he leisurely turn his horse and ride away, leaving me to hide my crimson face behind my hands, though there was no escaping the teasing. Our old house sat at the intersection behind the great Xianggo temple. Because of her illness, the wet nurse had stayed in the capital these past years to look after it, but a house empty for so long was bound to look desolate. The whole family busied themselves with cleaning until midnight, before it felt somewhat orderly. My father and Li Jinggrong had gone to the palace early and didn't return until dusk. Li Jinggrong was not from the capital. He spent his years stationed at the frontier and had no residence here. My father arranged for him to stay temporarily at my family home. Having lived in the inner chambers all my life, I wasn't used to a tall man moving about in front of me, making me feel quite unsettled. After he bathed, he walked around with his damp hair loose and relaxed, sometimes leaning over to flip through my old books, sometimes examining a painting, playing with a kite, or inspecting small ornaments. It was as if he were intentionally trying to leave his mark everywhere. Outside, the rain pitter-pattered against the banana leaves. It was late, and while he was wide awake, I was exhausted. But out of marital duty, I couldn't close my eyes until he went to sleep. I tried to hold out, but eventually drifted off, my head tilting to one side until a hand caught it. I woke to find Li Jingrang's dark eyes fixed on me. He asked softly, "If you're sleepy, why didn't you say so?" I looked at him, still half asleep, unsure how to answer. He said nothing more, simply pulling me into the blankets and taking off his boots to join me. He held my shoulder, letting me lean against his broad chest. From his chest, his voice vibrated deep and warm. "Ayun, how many times must I tell you? In front of me, you don't need to stand on ceremony. If you're sleepy, sleep. If you're angry, speak. If you're unhappy, hit me." His hand slowly stroked my hair, each word carrying the weight of 1,000 pounds. "Your man risks his life for merit so that you can return to the capital with your head held high, proud, and unyielding." I was too tired to open my eyes, and hearing him mutter such strange things only made me sleepier. Li Jingrang was truly odd. Other men wanted a gentle, submissive wife who treated her husband like the heavens. Even my father and brother, though good men, were never talked back to by my mother or sister-in-law when they were angry. Years ago, Cao Wenhan had agreed to our engagement precisely because he liked my mild temperament. He used to say I was gentle and sensible. To put it bluntly, I was as soft as dough, never fighting back even when struck. Cao Wenhan said he liked me that way because I was good, but Li Jingrang was nothing like them. Sometimes I thought he wished I would sit on his head and act like a tyrant. Only then would he be satisfied. But I didn't dare. A man's world was much larger than a woman's, and their hearts were hard to read. Today, they might be deeply in love. Tomorrow, they could turn cold and heartless. Li Jingrang had only recently married me. Perhaps he was just enjoying the novelty. I was grateful to him, but I reminded myself not to sink too deep. The rain from that year had chilled me to the bone, and I had yet to fully warm up. I couldn't decide the fate of my natal family or my husband's house. I could only keep my own heart from being hurt again. I pretended to be fast asleep. He seemed to sigh, a faint sound of helplessness, before leaning down to gently nip my earlobe, fearing he'd hurt me. He then followed it with a tender kiss to soothe it. The rain under the eaves gradually slowed, and the mist over the distant mountains cleared, revealing a soft light. After the storm, our family's luck began to turn. Yesterday, an imperial decree officially reinstated my father and brother. Early this morning, they went to court, looking no different than they had in their prime. Li Jingrang was also promoted, becoming one of the most promising young military officials in the capital. However, the fact that we were married had not yet become public knowledge. My sister-in-law brought in a stack of invitations and visiting cards, sighing with resignation. People are already rushing to flatter us before they even know the full story. I glanced at them. They were invitations for flower viewing, wine tasting, horse racing, all the usual gatherings where noble families showed off their unmarried daughters. Seeing how they politely addressed me as Miss, I couldn't help but laugh. It was hard to refuse such veiled intentions outright just by saying I was married. If I embarrassed them, they might sneer, "We never intended to form a match anyway," making our family look self-important. My sister-in-law racked her brain over this. Then a mischievous glint entered her eyes as she looked at me. "Why don't we just go? Let those people who once avoided you like the plague see exactly how you are now. Let them choke on their own spite while being unable to do a thing about it." With that, she insisted on dressing me in a vibrant emerald gown, my hair adorned with jade pins and shimmering jewels, as if she wanted me to blind people with radiance the moment I stepped out the door. I looked in the mirror, feeling hesitant. I worried that being too flashy would cause trouble for the family, especially since my father and brother had only just returned to power. My sister-in-law laughed. "What is there to fear? Your husband is now a second-rank Jiedushi, even if his fame in the capital hasn't caught up to his reputation at the border. If you don't help him show his face, he'll think he isn't imposing enough. With him backing us, the whole family should be rejoicing." She decisively pulled me onto the carriage, looking as though she were ready to settle every grievance we had ever suffered in the capital. Today's banquet was hosted by General Sun. It was early spring, and the greenery was lush. A horse racing track had been set up on one side, with a garden party on the other. Many noble ladies were in attendance, and the gates were crowded with carriages. My sister-in-law, being straightforward and hating such displays of status, pulled my hand and sneered, "They're busy keeping up appearances. I've already eaten 2 bowls of rice." General Sun's family had ties to my sister-in-law's family, so she knew the shortcuts. She led me through a side gate, along a path through a bamboo grove. To my surprise, as we neared the garden, we heard people whispering about me. My sister-in-law pulled me behind a decorative rockery, whispering in my ear, "Let's see who's slandering you this time." By the willow pond stood 2 women. Both were familiar faces. The rounder one was Cao Yue, the 4th daughter of the Cao family. She spoke of me with undisguised contempt. "So, what if that Liu Yanzhong girl has returned to the capital? After being tormented at the border all these years, even if she has a face like a goddess, she's nothing more than an old maid now. Hanger, don't worry. Even if my brother remarries, he won't spare her a second glance." The other, a tall and slender woman, was Wei Hanger, the Cao family's ward who had been infatuated with Cao Wenhan since childhood. If I had married into the Cao family, she would have only been a concubine. Unfortunately, because of that duke's daughter, she still hadn't managed to enter their doors. Now she looked melancholic. "But rumors say your brother remains a widower because he's waiting for her. Didn't he write her a letter back then? He's saying he would find a way to bring her back." "You actually believe that?" Cao Yue laughed scornfully, twirling a willow branch. "My brother was just humoring her. For all we know, she's been clutching that letter like a lucky charm for 5 years. How pathetic." My sister-in-law's face darkened, her teeth gritted, as she prepared to rush out and teach those girls a lesson. I quickly held her back, fearing her temper would cause a scene like years ago. The 2 women heard the movement and turned around, freezing in shock. Even mud has its own dignity. I moved in front of my sister-in-law, facing them calmly. "Ladies, I have been married for a long time and have no connection to the Cao family, let alone some baseless letter. You accuse me of sullying my reputation. Do you have any proof?" Cao Yue stared at me for a long time, as if unable to believe her eyes. When she finally found her voice, she sneered, "What kind of man could you possibly get in a barren wasteland like Shuozhou? Probably some illiterate brute. What is there to be proud of? My brother is a scholar of the emperor. He might even become a chancellor in the future." My sister-in-law laughed in fury, coughing as she tried to retort. "Ha! What do you know? Yunner's husband is cough cough. He is—" "And who else could it be?" A steady, leisurely voice sounded from behind her. "It is I." Cao Yue and Wei Hanger turned to see a tall man surrounded by General Sun and a group of officials. Their expressions were initially confused, but seeing the cautious look on the elder Lord Cao's face and the stunned, ghostly pale face of Cao Wenhan, they immediately understood. Their faces drained of color and their shoulders began to tremble. From my vantage point, Cao Wenhan looked out of place in his official robes. My brother mentioned he had come to ask for my hand, which left me stunned. In the distance, the Cao family members slunk away from the party in shame. Cao Wenhan looked back, his brow furrowed in sorrow, but before he could stay, his father slapped his shoulder and shoved him through the moon gate. My brother tugged my sleeve and lowered his voice. "Stop looking." Back at the house, Jinggrong almost drew his blade on that Cao fellow. "If you keep looking now, he'll really get angry." What do you mean, looking? I was speechless, glancing at my brother before looking at Li Jinggrang, who was talking to General Sun under the corridor. He looked so calm, hardly like someone who had almost gone crazy, as my brother claimed. My sister-in-law, however, looked triumphant. Humph! After how he treated Yun-Er and humiliated our family, now that his wife is dead, he thinks he can just pick her back up as a second wife? He's dreaming. My brother told her to hush. Li Jinggrang stepped out from the group of generals, his stature making him stand out, even among the tallest of them. As he ducked under the eaves and walked toward me, his gaze was dark and deep. The surroundings had gone quiet. The wind rippled across the pond, reflecting the golden light of the setting sun. He pulled my cloak tighter around my shoulders, without a word. Even I could tell he was unhappy. But Cao Wenhan and I were long finished. This was just a misunderstanding. From now on, he would likely avoid me at all costs. I assumed Li Jinggrang was angry because he felt he had lost face, someone proposing to his wife while he was right there. Having reached this conclusion, I whispered an apology. "I'm sorry for troubling you." Li Jinggrang stopped in his tracks, his face hidden in the twilight shadows, his lips curled, but it didn't look like a smile. So polite? His reaction confused me. I felt like I had said the wrong thing again. I bit my lip and fell silent, much as I used to when facing Cao Wenhan. When my father was the prefect of Lin'an, the Cao family were our neighbors. Since my brother was much older, from the age of 7 or 8 until I was 14, Cao Wenhan acted as an elder brother, teaching me to read and write. Back then, he would often complain, "Sister Yunzhong is so foolish. She makes people angry without even knowing it," constantly asking questions until one's head aches. After hearing that, I didn't dare speak much, preferring to stay quiet to avoid being a nuisance. But Li Jinggrang was harder to understand than 10 Cao Wenhans combined. Apologizing was wrong. Staying silent was wrong. He seemed helpless with me too, standing still for a long time before suddenly asking, "If he hadn't married someone else back then, would you have become his wife?" I was stunned. "But he did marry someone else. There can be nothing between us." Li Jinggrang took a step closer, closing the distance between us. His long lashes cast shadows over his dark eyes as he stared at me, something turbulent swirling within. "I am saying if he had waited for you in the capital, and you had met me in Shuozhou, who would you have chosen?" I was speechless, my mind in a whirl, but before I could think, General Sun's attendant arrived to announce that the banquet had begun. Throughout the rest of the evening and the journey home, Li Jinggrang didn't say another word to me. Previously, no matter how angry he was, he would tell me. But this time, he chose to close the doors to his heart, one by one, with heavy thuds that felt like a bottomless, cold night. Standing outside those doors, I felt a wave of panic. Men are truly difficult to understand. My sister-in-law didn't agree. She curled her lip. "Your brother is much easier to read." I thought for a moment. "Li Jinggrang is the one who's confusing." This time she nodded and sighed, "With me." Taking advantage of a sunny day to dry old books in the yard, my sister-in-law and I leaned against the window, watching the wet nurse energetically direct the servants. Suddenly, my sister-in-law clapped her hands. "That brother-in-law of mine has a mind like a beehive. One poke and it explodes. I can't figure out what he's jealous of. How about you come with me to the Xianggu Temple Market today? We'll buy a cat or a dog to coax him. That should do it." She was applying her method for handling my brother to Li Jinggrang. I wasn't sure if it would work. The Xianggu Temple Market opened 5 times a month. The area in front of the main gate was for selling birds, cats, and dogs. The whole street was bustling. My sister-in-law was mesmerized by the goods. She and my brother both loved riding and falconry, so as soon as she saw some gerfalcons, she was hooked, haggling with the seller. The crowd was thick, and we got separated, leaving me standing alone amidst a pile of soft little animals, feeling a bit lost. I thought carefully. Li Jinggrong didn't seem to have any specific hobbies. Whether it was rare birds or sharp blades, he wasn't picky as long as they were useful on the battlefield. Even his daily food and clothing were simple: fine silk or coarse cloth, delicacies or wild vegetable porridge. To him, they were just to cover his body and fill his stomach. Perhaps because he had lost his parents in battle at a young age, and his path to success was paved with blood, his mind was much deeper than others his age. If my father and brother hadn't said he was a good man, I wouldn't have dared go near him. As I was lost in thought, something tugged at my skirt. A small, ginger-spotted kitten stepped onto my dress, but looking up with eyes as round and bright as stars reflected in a pond. For some reason, I was reminded of the first time I met Li Jinggrong. He was training a hawk on the grasslands. My father pointed him out to me. "That is the son of Governor Li. Yunner, what do you think of him?" Before I could get a clear look at his face, the hawk suddenly flew toward me, its wings flapping hard and kicking up dust into my face. It stung so much that my eyes watered, and I lowered my head, sobbing and rubbing my eyes. Li Jinggrong immediately leapt off his horse and rushed over, opening his water skin to pour water onto his hands as he leaned down to look at me. He said, "I apologize, my lady." The cool water helped me see his face clearly, a pair of eyes brighter than the stars, with long, straight lashes. A person like that, with eyes like that, you should have lived a life of leisure by the Xinhui River, not struggling on a blood-soaked battlefield. But he hadn't chosen that path. His fate, his silence, and the tenderness he showed me made my heart soften. I leaned down to pick up the kitten. The seller smiled. 30 copper coins. A pair of slender, fair hands handed over the money for me. I frowned in surprise. Cao Wenhan had appeared behind me at some point, looking gently at the cat in my arms. "This one looks just like the one we raised when we were small." At that moment, I saw Li Jinggrong across the way, returning from his camp inspection to pick me up. He overheard Cao Wenhan's words, and his expression instantly darkened. Without a word, he turned and disappeared into the crowd. Cao Wenhan didn't notice, and continuing to call me second sister and asking why I was avoiding him. I looked at him with pure disgust. For the first time in my life, I felt the urge to hit someone. I counted out 30 coins from my own purse, not missing a single one, and threw them into his hand. I snatched the cat and turned to leave. Cao Wenhan, his face souring, chased after me. "Is there a need to be so clinical? Even if you are married, can I not be kind to you? Is your husband so jealous that he forbids you from even speaking to me?" I replied coldly. "Master Cao, mind your words. My marriage is none of your business." "None of my business?" Cao Wenhan chuckled, a flash of pain in his eyes. "Have I become an outsider so quickly?" He suddenly gritted his teeth and grabbed my wrist, pulling me into a secluded corner by the temple's red walls. He yanked open his collar to reveal a faint scar on his neck. His voice went hoarse, his eyes red and lips trembling. "I know you hate me for marrying Lady Lu, but you must understand, I did fight for you. After I saw you that day, I told my parents that even if the engagement was broken, I would marry no one else. My mother immediately grabbed a rope to hang herself, and my father drew a blade, saying he would kill himself if I didn't comply." He moved closer, his voice shaking. "You see, it was all useless. I was forced to kneel at the altar with her with this scar on my body." His voice was full of grievance, as if he carried the weight of the world's injustice, But I only felt revulsion. The kitten in my arms meowed weakly in fear. A wave of disgust rose within me, and I shoved him away forcefully. Do I truly look that stupid and gullible to you? He was stunned. The day you wore your wedding robes and rode through the city gates, how proud you looked. Forced? How laughable. Did you only find out the day after our engagement was broken that the Liu family would marry their daughter to you the very next morning? I looked him straight in the eye, every word sharp. He was speechless. I took a deep breath, brushing my sleeve as if to wipe away every bit of history connected to him. You say I hate you? No, I don't hate you because you aren't important enough to hate. Even as a couple, when disaster strikes, everyone looks out for themselves. My family was in ruin. I understood you couldn't marry me. But since you chose a different path, don't come back and lie to me. Don't make me feel disgusted. Don't destroy the peaceful days I have now. I shook my head, truly unable to understand him. Do you want to be good to me, or do you want me to be as miserable as I was 5 years ago, so you can play the noble savior and have me wag my tail for you like a grateful pet? Cao Wenhan stammered, his face pale as a ghost, frantically denying it. How could I? Enough. I cut him off, exhausted. If you truly care for our past bond, then from this day forward, never disturb my life again. The evening sun stretched across the temple walls. Cao Wenhan stood in the shadows like a mindless stone sinking to the bottom of a dark ocean. I didn't look back, but after just a few steps, a formidable figure stepped out from the corner. The sound of a blade unsheathing sliced through the air as it was raised high, aimed straight at Cao Wenhan. Li Jinggrang! I rushed to stop him. The lines of his eyes were sharp and cold, his brow pressed tight, an aura of darkness surrounding him that chilled me to the bone. He looked down at me, his voice low. Are you protecting him? I was smarter this time and immediately shook my head. He isn't worth staining your hands with blood. The killing intent in Li Jinggrang's eyes softened slightly. He cast a sideways glance at the motionless figure of Cao Wenhan in the dark before slamming his blade back into its scabbard. He had truly intended to kill him. On the carriage, he kept his face turned toward the window, his jawline tense. For a long time, no one spoke. Suddenly, his eyes fixed on the small kitten I had quietly tucked into his lap. He frowned, a flash of distaste on his face. I said seriously, "It's a gift for you," I added. "It looks a bit like you." Li Jinggrang's expression became strange. The kitten was mischievous, clawing at his robes and climbing up his arm until, thwack! A soft paw slapped his chin. He wanted to push it away, but didn't know how to handle such a tiny, fragile creature. He sat there, stiff and flustered. I couldn't help but burst out laughing. The bamboo curtains swayed, and the sunlight filtered through the gaps, casting tiny specks of light onto his high nose and thick lashes. He turned to look at me and smiled, his gaze finally softening. Eventually, he relaxed his hand, resigned to letting the kitten wreak havoc in his lap. It turned out Li Jinggrang wasn't as hard to coax as I thought. When I stepped into the house, my sister-in-law was already gleefully holding her new hawk on her arm. "Tch! Only you can handle him. Anyone else wouldn't stand a chance." I was confused. She stroked the hawk's feathers and lowered her voice. "The court has been in an uproar lately. Chancellor Shu is leading the civil officials in demanding a northward expedition to reclaim the 6 border cities lost 10 years ago. He's stirring up the public to pressure Jinggrang into being the commander-in-chief." So that was it. Recently, Li Jinggrang had been leaving early and returning late. Many times I would wake in the middle of the night to find the bed cold, and I would creep out to see him standing alone in the yard, staring at the sky. He looked so solitary. It's not as simple as those scholars think. My sister-in-law sighed. They see Jingrong's string of victories at the border and think the time is ripe, but they forget one crucial thing. Can they provide the supplies and wages? Having come from a military family herself, she understood that while the court wanted war, the soldiers didn't. The reason was simple. If they won, the credit went to the scholars. If they lost, the lives lost were the soldiers. On her arm, the sea hawk tilted its head, its sharp eyes scanning the surroundings like a predator. I held the kitten in my arms, looking out the window at the darkening sky. Spring had arrived, but the rain was still dismal and the clouds gray, with only faint glimmers of light peeking through the cracks in the heavens. The border victories weren't luck. It's because the Li family has guarded that frontier for generations. Jingrang's ancestors spilled blood to build forts, stockpile grain, and train troops. Their army is united. The generals and soldiers eat and sleep together. That's how they won. She was deeply worried. You don't know. The imperial army is manipulated by officials. It's a mess. Many don't know how to fight and are divided by factions. The southern troops are lazy and full of tricks. The only strong forces are a few cavalry, units belonging to great generals or the western tribal lords, but they only listen to their own masters, not the court. If Jingrong truly leads the northward expedition, just coordinating the troops will be a nightmare. It's an impossible fight. In recent years, the Xiongnu have grown stronger. They have brilliant leaders and have reformed their army based on our models. They are 10 times harder to fight than before. And our court? The civil officials only know how to use patriotism to spout nonsense, while the military officials are suppressed and dare not speak. It's a stalemate. I listened in silence, a deep sense of unease rising within me. Crack! A bolt of lightning tore across the sky as a heavy downpour suddenly began. The sea hawk immediately spread its wings and dove into the rain. A moment later, it caught a small bird and dropped it to the ground, a bloody mess. Li Jingrong's silence regarding the war led to many misunderstandings. Outside, bitter tongues wagged behind his back, calling him a coward who pulled his head into his shell to enjoy his stipend while the world burned. Even the servants in our manor began to whisper. My wet nurse once asked me, why won't he fight? People said my husband was a formidable man. If he could wash away the national humiliation in one fell swoop and reclaim the lost territories, would his name not be etched in the annals of history forever? The public clamored for the northern expedition, a mountain of memorials piled up at court, a weight so heavy it seemed Li Jingrong could barely breathe. One night I jolted awake from a nightmare drenched in blood. My back was cold and sweat poured down my face. Instinctively, I reached for the familiar warmth beside me, but the bed was empty. I threw on a cloak and left the room. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the air remained thick with moisture. Flower petals and fallen leaves lay scattered across the ground. Li Jingrong stood in the midst of that chaos, obsessively polishing an old blade, his father's sword. A terrifying realization took root in my heart. He wanted to go. He wanted to go more than anyone. His parents and his clan had been slaughtered. And this vengeance had been simmering for years. If given the chance, he would gladly trade his life for revenge. Yet, he had shackled himself with the chains of the bigger picture. Those who truly understood knew the time was not yet right for a northern expedition. Rather than rushing into battle, the nation needed time to breathe, to reform its administration, and to heal its internal fractures. My father and several veteran ministers adamantly opposed the war. Even young scholars knelt daily outside the palace, submitting petitions begging the emperor not to be blinded by power-hungry officials, for the nation lacked the strength to sustain a conflict. Once the northern expedition began, resources would be consumed at a terrifying rate. As the front lines stretched and taxes soared, who would suffer most? It would be the common folk, those voiceless, downtrodden souls who would once again break their backs to carry the burden. Li Jingrang was caught in an impossible dilemma. He didn't want me to know. By day, he still laughed and coaxed me to sleep, but by night, he stayed awake alone, facing his inner turmoil. I stepped forward and gently draped a cloak over his shoulders. He started, sheathing his blade. He glanced at me and reached out to brush a damp lock of hair from my temple, smiling softly. Another nightmare? Don't be afraid. Back in Shuozhou, I had nightmares constantly, dreaming of my family's ruin, of my sister-in-law, and me begging for help only to have every door slammed in our faces. I dreamed of my father and brother rotting in prison, with no one to collect their remains. During those nights, Li Jingrang would stay awake to watch over me. If he saw my expression falter, he would immediately wake me and patiently pat my back until I drifted off again. On clear nights, he would take me riding to the outskirts to gaze at the stars until I found peace in his arms. He always told me not to be afraid, promising he would always be there. His fingers were callous from training, and he carried the faint scent of the wild steppe grass. I leaned against his chest, at a loss for how to comfort a man so strong. He picked me up, holding me tight. "It's cold. Go back to sleep." I looked into his weary eyes, wrapped my arms around his neck, and whispered, "You shouldn't be afraid either. No matter what happens, I am with you." Li Jingrang froze. Beneath us, in a stone niche, a small lamp flickered, it casting a dim glow as the courtyard lay in silent darkness. After a long silence, he asked in a raspy voice, "If this war is inevitable, if I suffer a crushing defeat and am cursed by the world, bringing shame upon you, would you still stay?" I nodded firmly. "I won't leave." He looked at me, his eyes shimmering as if on the verge of tears. He leaned down and whispered in my ear, "And what if I die?" I knew what he wanted to hear. He wanted me to say that if he died, I would be inconsolable, cherishing his memory for the rest of my life. But I couldn't bear the word death. Just hearing it brought tears to my eyes. I threw myself into his arms, sobbing, "Don't you dare die." He could lose the battle, he could lose his fame, but he could not die. I couldn't endure it. Li Jingrang let out a beautiful laugh. "So, if I die, you'll truly be that heartbroken?" I looked up blankly, only to see his eyes sparkling with mischief and a hint of smugness. Frustrated and hurt, I choked out a reproach. Are you mad?" He laughed loudly, sweeping me up and spinning me around the yard. I immediately began to struggle, hitting and pinching him. "I don't care about you anymore. Put me down." The kitten in the room, awakened by the noise, waddled out and hissed, nipping at Li Jingrang's robes. He laughed and scolded the cat. "Even the cat takes your side?" After a night of playfulness, the northern expedition was finally decided. The emperor appointed Li Jingrang and the veteran general Wu Chun as commanders of the Eastern Army, while other generals led the central and western routes. Everything was set for June. Outside, the atmosphere was frantic. Though the military officials were dissatisfied, the imperial decree had been issued. They could only vent their frustrations before focusing on preparations. Yet even now, there were those who stood on the sidelines casting stones. Such was the capital. No matter how chaotic the world became, the manors of the wealthy remained opulent, filled with endless banquets. My sister-in-law had to follow my brother to the front, so I was forced to handle the social obligations she couldn't refuse. Today, Princess Xinyang hosted a banquet, and as luck would have it, I crossed paths with the Cao family again. Cao Yue still hadn't lost her habit of slandering others behind their backs. Having lost face to me last time, she was even more bitter now, her words laced with more venom than before. The banquet was filled with talk of the northern expedition. She suddenly sneered. They're so grand now, making a scene for the whole country to see, acting so righteous and imposing. But when they fall from those heights and suffer a defeat as pathetic as 5 years ago, some people are going to be very miserable. Her implication was clear. Li Jinggrang would fail, and I would fall into ruin again. Wei Hanger tugged at her sleeve, whispering, "Fourth sister, she's right here. Stop it." Cao Yue shook her off, her tone haughty. "I didn't mention anyone by name. I was just speaking my mind." She leaned toward me, arching an eyebrow. "Surely a lady as magnanimous as you doesn't think I'm talking about you." The poison had been in her blood since childhood. Back then, it could be dismissed as immaturity, but at this age, it was simply loathsome. I refused to tolerate it any longer. I set down my chopsticks, my gaze stern. "It doesn't matter who you are talking about. Those words should never have been uttered. The Northern Expedition is the Emperor's will and the people's desire. Our soldiers carry the resolve to wash away our national shame, spilling their blood on the battlefield. The war hasn't even begun, yet you casually speak of defeat and falling hard. What exactly is your intent? I know you don't understand state affairs, so is this what you hear within your own household? Do you believe the Northern Expedition is doomed and that the Emperor and his officials are all wrong?" Cao Yue turned pale, stammering an attempt at a retort. I didn't even look at her. I gave a slight nod to Princess Xinyang and politely asked to be excused. Pray forgive me, Your Highness, but I cannot sit at the same table as those who lack all sense of shame." Princess Xinyang narrowed her eyes at the two sisters. "My banquet is indeed no place for such talk." Immediately, attendants dragged the two sisters away to be dealt with. Humiliated, they would likely never be invited to a banquet again. The Duke's family looked on with sheer delight, and the surrounding ladies chimed in with further jests, setting the whole table laughing. Lady Cao had intended to defend her niece, but the fire spread to the entire Cao clan, sending her into a fit of rage so intense she fainted on the spot. Cao Yue's words were malicious, but what truly bothered me was her insistence that Li Jinggrang cannot win. Those words left my heart in a state of restless unease, where I forced myself to eat a few bites before making an excuse to leave early. On my way back, I encountered a woman from the Duke's family. She had a long face, with features that bore a resemblance to the late second Miss Liu. The woman gave a slow bow and smiled. "I didn't expect a gentle lady like you to be so sharp. It must be nice to have a husband who backs you up." Unsure if she meant well, I simply nodded and prepared to leave. She didn't stop me, but muttered to herself, "Poor sister of mine, married into the Cao family with a heavy dowry, thinking she'd found a lifeline, only to find her husband didn't just fail to protect her, but wished for her death as soon as possible." Her sister was the eldest daughter of the Liu family. From her tone, it seemed there was something suspicious about the second Miss's death. I didn't want to get involved in the feuds between the Liu and Cao families, so I bowed politely and tried to walk around her. Suddenly, her voice rose behind me. "Aren't you curious, madam? Why is it that for years people have proposed a northern expedition only for Chancellor Shu to delay it, yet this year he is suddenly so adamant about war?" My steps faltered in suspicion. I turned to look at her. She spoke slowly. "Last year, Chancellor Shu's star pupil went on a diplomatic mission to the northern Qin and signed a treaty to exchange 2 prefectures for 20,000 silver taels and annual tributes of silk. Without losing a single soldier, He reclaimed 2 prefectures and was quickly promoted. That man was Cao Wenhan. He signed that treaty so easily, yet this year he joins Chancellor Shu in advocating to tear it up, or provoking the tribes and pushing the court toward war. Don't you find that strange? Was that treaty truly as simple as it appeared? Her voice wasn't rushed, but it hit me like a thunderclap in midsummer, sending a chill down my spine. Of course, others might not understand how difficult the northern expedition was, but Cao Wenhan, who had been to the northern Qin with Chancellor Shu and had served under 2 reigns, how could he not know? To know it was a death trap and still deceive the emperor, dragging the army and the people into it. They must have had no choice. They must have been hiding something so catastrophic that if it were exposed, they would be the first to fall. The Liu lady had likely heard something from the duke's manor, though she lacked proof. It was mostly speculation. Ishi pulled me to a secluded spot and spoke cautiously. My father only recently noticed something was wrong. In the Privy Council, he had access to military documents. He discovered that while the 2 eastern armies under Li and Wu were well prepared, the other 2 wings were composed of southern troops. The commanders are either meritorious officials who don't understand war or stubborn, untamable types. My father secretly wrote to a friend serving as a military advisor in the south, and the reply was grim. The equipment is lacking, the soldiers are old and weak, and the 20,000 troops on paper are actually fewer than 5,000. The Liu lady's hands were ice cold, her eyes as dark as a bottomless abyss. My father says if this is true, the war is destined for a disastrous defeat. Not only will the 6 border cities remain lost, but Li Jinggrang's life, and even the entire northern line of Shuozhou, will be buried. The northern tribes have been planning this for a long time. Shuozhou sits right on their border, and under the Li family's watch, it has become a thorn in their side. Thinking of it this way, was Cao Wenhan's mission last year actually a failure? Perhaps the tribes used his hunger for merit to set a trap. They might have threatened or bribed him into a secret alliance, then used him to bring down Chancellor Shu, who was a longtime pacifist. Those 2 have bound their fates together to preserve their power and reputation. They are merely pretending to shout for war. Once the tribes win and gain the benefits from a new peace treaty, those 2 can walk over the corpses of our soldiers and enjoy their rewards. If that is the truth, it is truly terrifying. I shuddered involuntarily. The Liu lady gritted her teeth in hatred. Cao Wenhan is a man of a blackened heart. There is nothing he wouldn't do. Years ago, my sister was kidnapped and lost her virtue. He suddenly appeared claiming he had long admired her and didn't care about her past, wishing to marry her. In the end, he only wanted the Duke's power and to sever all ties with his old life. Once the storm passed, he began to loathe her, even refusing to acknowledge his own child. He claimed the child was a bastard and drove my sister to her death. I was deeply shaken, my fingers trembling. She squeezed my hand, her voice choked with emotion. Madam, I know you are a good person. Years ago, my family's alliance with the Cao family brought you shame, yet you never mistreated my sister. I tell you these things today not just for revenge, but because I truly hope your husband can escape this calamity. My father is old and has been away from court for many years. His words carry no weight with His Majesty. I can only pass this news to you. Perhaps there is still a way to turn things around. I felt the sincerity in her grip, but my mind was in such chaos that I couldn't find my words. I could only nod quickly, thank her, and practically run from the scene. My limbs felt weak. I struggled to remain calm as I rushed home. Recently, my brother, sister-in-law, and Li Jinggrang had all been staying at the military camps. My father had been chosen as a lecturer for the crown prince and didn't return until sunset. My heart burning with anxiety, I paced the gates until I finally saw my father's carriage. Before it even stopped, I rushed forward. "Father! Father!" He opened the curtain, looking at me in shock. Throughout the walk inside, I pulled and pushed him, his official robes wrinkled under my grip. He sighed helplessly. "Dignity, Yunner, dignity. Your brother is crude enough, but why are you so impulsive? It must be that son-in-law of mine spoiling you." Once we reached the main hall, I dismissed the servants. I had no mind for ladylike grace. I poured out everything the Liu lady had told me in one breath. The room fell into a heavy silence. My father's expression grew grim. He stood rooted to the spot, lost in thought, instinctively clutching his wrinkled sleeve. After a long while, he finally spoke. "This is a disaster." Immediately, he turned and barked an order. "Send word to bring my son, my daughter-in-law, and Jing Grang back to the manor at once." Then, remembering something, he frowned. "No, I must go to the Office of Diplomatic Correspondence first." My father had friends there. If there truly were an ulterior motive in Cao Wenhan's dealings, investigating it was paramount. But as he stepped over the threshold, he stopped abruptly, his eyes heavy. He said in a low voice, "No, I must go to the Eastern Palace first. The Crown Prince is young but compassionate. This matter is too significant. Our family cannot investigate this alone." Two groups set out immediately. One carriage turned back toward the Eastern Flower Gate, while a swift horse carried an urgent message toward the military camps. I pressed my hand to my chest, trying to soothe my racing heart, and looked toward the mountains behind the palace as they were bathed in the setting sun. The evening sky was a fiery red, with clouds like tongues of flame melting over the peaks, threatening to incinerate everything in their path. Not long after, two memorials submitted by the Crown Prince shook the court like a thunderbolt from a clear sky. The first revealed that Cao Wenhan had conspired with the northern tribes during his mission. In reality, the tribes knew every detail of the northern expedition and had already set an ambush at the border, waiting for our army to step into the mire. The second revealed that Chancellor Shu had accepted bribes from the tribes to cover up the failed mission and had pushed for the northern expedition as a way to cover his tracks. In his manner, thus officials found drafts of the peace negotiations prepared in advance and countless secret messages with Cao Wenhan that he hadn't had time to burn. The evidence was undeniable. The hot-tempered old General Wu was so enraged during the court session that he threw his jade tablet directly at Chancellor Shu's face. Even the emperor, who had once favored the man, was so furious he slammed his inkstone onto Shu's head, leaving him bleeding and unconscious on the floor of the Golden Throne Room. Immediately after, Cao Wenhan was imprisoned, and the Cao Manor was seized, revealing a treasury overflowing with gold and jewels. The truth of how the Cao family had driven the Liu girl to her death was also brought to light. The white-haired Lord Liu was finally able to bring his skeletal grandson and his daughter's memorial tablet back to his manor, and restoring honor to a daughter who had suffered even in death. It felt like divine retribution, but war was still inevitable. The northern tribes had been prepared for too long. They wouldn't withdraw just because their scheme was exposed. The conflict was now only a matter of time. The war drums sounded, and the order for the northern expedition was issued. Since the eastern route was revealed as a ruse, Li Jinggrang immediately petitioned to return to Shuozhou to prepare the defenses before the tribes could react. He left quietly the night before his departure. My sister-in-law said he was afraid I would cry. A few days later, my brother and sister-in-law also set out. I held tightly to their horses' reins, my heart full of worry and longing. My sister-in-law laughed half-jokingly. Oh, you truly are a clingy one. Lucky Jingrang ran off early. My father stepped up from behind and patted my shoulder gently. There now, Yun Er. He watched my brother and sister-in-law with pride and affection. Then he turned to me, his smile gentle, but his eyes filled with profound resolve. How can one have a home if the enemy is not destroyed? We protect the rear so they have the strength to march forward. Banners blocked the sun, and dust rose beneath the horses' hooves. I silently watched them leave, tears shimmering in my eyes. My father squeezed my shoulder, his arm as steady as a fortress wall. They will return safely. His voice was as firm as a mountain, as strong as steel. The news from Shuozhou was not good at first. One urgent message followed another. Each time I heard the sound of hooves racing through the palace gates, and my heart hammered in my chest. In just a few months, I grew visibly thin. My wet nurse was so worried her hair was falling out, and she knelt daily before the Buddha, praying I would eat a bit more. My father, unable to bear it, frowned and said, "If you eat so little and stay so gloomy, how will you live a long life? Remember when we were in Shuozhou? We were at death's door, but we pulled through. A soldier's life is about finding peace in danger. Until the very last moment, who can say who has won?" He looked at my haggard face and sighed softly. Or should I write to Shuozhou so that son-in-law of mine, busy as he is, has to worry about you too? Startled, I waved my hands and immediately began to shove rice into my mouth, mumble-talking as I chewed. No, father, don't write. It wouldn't be good if he got distracted. My father looked at me with a flicker of sorrow in his eyes, turning away and taking a deep breath as if suppressing an emotion. During the sleepless nights, I held the plump little cat and stared blankly at the moon in the yard. Li Jinggrong used to stand right here, gazing at the sky. I wondered if the sky in Shuozhou was as peaceful for him. Summer turned to autumn, and soon winter arrived. By the time I received a letter from my sister-in-law, snow was beginning to fall outside my window. She wrote, "The war is currently at a stalemate, but it cannot yet be called a victory. The two sides are locked in a struggle. It seems it will eventually come down to a peace negotiation. We can only hope the diplomat sent by the court is capable." My father fell silent upon hearing the news. Then, he straightened his official robes and went to court, volunteering to go on the mission. The court was in an uproar. Scholars and soldiers alike praised Lord Liu for his great righteousness. Only I wanted to storm the prison and hack Cao Wenhan into 1,000 pieces. He caused the disaster. Why must my family bear all the consequences? My father laughed when he heard my complaints, patting my head with a warm gaze. When the war ends, he will naturally face his reckoning. My father left with an air of unyielding spirit, clad in his broad-sleeved robes, holding his diplomatic staff, and standing tall as a pine tree, he marched boldly toward the north. Only my wet nurse and I remained in the house. Every day was like a stone dropped into a lake. Every minute was spent waiting. As the new year approached, and I watched the nanny paste red couplets on the door and suddenly said, "Nanny, let's go to Shuozhou." She was so startled she almost tumbled off the steps. "Miss, if the master and the young master find out, will my old bones survive?" But Shuozhou isn't as chaotic as before. With Li Jinggrong guarding the pass, the tribes won't dare move. Right now, it's just a battle of wits in the negotiations. My father's mission has already yielded results. Under his sharp pen, the tribes haven't gained much. I pulled her aside, acting spoiled. "Didn't you say that even if the sky falls, we must celebrate the new year properly? I won't have them leaving us all alone in the capital." The wet nurse stared at me, agape. Seeing me decisively packing my bags and calling for a carriage, she couldn't close her mouth for a long time. Arashi shook her head and sighed softly. My young lady used to be so obedient. Then she seemed to realize something. She stomped her foot and grumbled, It's all because the young master spoiled you. I laughed. Li Jinggrang loved teaching me to fear nothing under heaven. This time, I'd go straight to Shuozhou and see if he was afraid. The wind and snow in Shuozhou were so fierce I could barely open my eyes. We tried to race against time, but we still missed New Year's Eve. It wasn't until near the Lantern Festival that we arrived. When Li Jinggrang heard I had come, he was so panicked he put his boots on the wrong feet. He stared at me for a long time without a word, and I stared at him, not knowing what to say. He had gained a few silver hairs. I was silent out of heartache, but he was so angry he couldn't contain it. Ah, Liu Yunzhong! Never before had I heard him bellow my name so loudly. The nanny beside me was so frightened she immediately stepped back. The shout left my ears ringing, and I muttered, Do you have to shout so loud? His face was red, his neck was red, and his anger was like an avalanche. You intend to rebel, don't you? Is this a place for you to be? Such a long journey, all by yourself. Suddenly, he choked up as if someone were squeezing his throat. He turned away, covering his face with his hand, his voice raspy. Are you trying to kill me? I leaned closer and looked up at him. Oh? Are you crying? No way. Does the great General Li Jinggrang truly worry enough to shed tears? He looked at me in disbelief, his eyes red and his chest heaving. The wet nurse, who shared his plight, shook her head and sighed as she walked toward my brother and sister-in-law, who were running toward us. Whoever spoiled her can deal with her, I laughed, and threw my arms around the stunned Li Jinggrang. My hood was blown back by the wind, and snow covered my hair. I told you, wherever you are, I will be with you. He bowed his head and held me tight, hot tears falling onto my neck. When the Lantern Festival ended, the snow stopped falling. My father returned safely from the northern Qin, stopping in Shuozhou, and our family was finally able to celebrate a complete new year together. We raised our glasses in a toast, first to the youngsters, then to the elders, as the blossoms brightened and songs echoed, marking a long and prosperous new year.